In today's episode, Chef Erica will show us how to make delicious kosher spiced brisket tacos using Prairie Street Prime's USDA Prime brisket and these fresh ingredients.
Ooh, look at all that juice. Yum. That is insane. It's probably all over my face. Welcome to Prairie Street Prime Culinary Kitchen. I'm Chef Erica, guest chef for the day here in the kitchen. I've been a chef for 25 years. I worked in restaurants in New York for many years, and I've been a culinary educator and food writer and food media host for a lot of those years. So today I'm going to show you how to make amazing spice rubbed brisket tacos. And these tacos are incredible. We're gonna make an amazing spice rub, put it all over our brisket, and then we're gonna sear the brisket and finish it in the oven. While the brisket's cooking, we're going to make a roasted pepper salsa with avocado and tomato, and also some pickled red onions. It's gonna be great. So what do we need to do first? We need to get that spice rub made first. So we're gonna do about a half a tablespoon of cinnamon. You don't ever wanna use too much cinnamon in a spice rub, otherwise your food will taste like dessert. We're gonna add a full tablespoon of ground cumin, a full tablespoon of ground coriander, and a full tablespoon of smoked paprika in there. Now, ancho chili powder can be kind of hot, so you want to be judicious. Decide how hot you like it and put it in. I'm going to put in maybe 2 teaspoons, and you can also use any chili powder that you like, your favorite kind. We're going to add a little bit of sugar in there. That's to balance out some of the spices. So I'm going to add a tablespoon of sugar, and then I'll add about a teaspoon of ground black pepper, and of course, salt. So I probably added about a tablespoon of kosher salt to that. Okay, I'm gonna just give that a good stir, mix that up. Now, let's bring out that meat. So this is Prairie Street Prime's USDA Prime second cut brisket. Brisket doesn't get better than this. This is the Rolls Royce of briskets. This is some amazing meat. And you can see how beautifully marbled it is. I'm leaving all that nice fat cap on. Now, this is a really big piece of meat here. So I'm going to cut it right down the middle into 2 pieces. Okay, let's get that spice rub on here. So I'm really gonna go crazy. I'm just gonna like slather this with this spice rub. So I'm gonna get that all rubbed down. Okay, so really pick it all up like that. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is sear this. So it's important when you do this to use a really heavy pan. Something that's thick, solid, like an enamel cast iron, Dutch oven, big, deep, wide saucepan, something like that. Something that can really take the heat. Super important when you're searing any kind of meat is that you get your pan hot first. So I've got my pan hot first. I haven't added any oil to it yet. But then once that pan is hot, that's when we add the oil. So this pan is nice and hot. Now I'm gonna add some olive oil to it. Now this brisket, as we saw, has a great amount of marbling. It's got a really nice fat cap on it. I don't need a lot of oil in my pan because of that. I added my oil. My oil's definitely getting hot, and now I'm going to add the brisket. Ugh, it's a big, heavy piece. I'm gonna lay it right in there. Now I wanna let that get a really nice crust on it. You wanna remember when you're searing, you're looking for brown because brown equals flavor. So don't rush it when you're searing anything. Really let that crust develop on your meat. So let's take a peek at that now. Let's see. Now that is looking great. I wish you guys could smell this because it smells so good. I'm gonna turn it over and I'm gonna let the other side go now. Okay. Ugh. Oh my God, we need like a hydraulic crane to lift up this piece of meat. Now the second piece goes in, just like that. Whenever you work with dry spices, it's important to first toast them in oil. And that's what we're doing here. So I flipped this over, and now I'm gonna actually put my second piece right in there with it because we're gonna get going on this momentarily. And we need a little bit of liquid in there. What we're doing here is sort of a braise. Although ultimately we're gonna cook most of the liquid out of this. This is just a little bit of chicken stock. You could use water, chicken stock. You could even use some canned tomatoes, something like that. But we just want a little bit of liquid in there. So in goes just a little chicken stock. And you'll notice that I poured the chicken stock around the meat, not on top of it, because I don't want to wash off all that spice rub before it has a chance to do its job. Now, we're going to cover this up. You want a nice, heavy, tight-fitting lid for that. Cover that right up, and we're going in. Okay, now, When you cook something like a brisket, it's all about low and slow. Brisket is a cut of meat that really needs some long, slow cooking time. So we're at 300 degrees. We're gonna leave it in there for a good couple of hours, but in about an hour, I'll take a temperature. It's really important when you're cooking meats to be aware of the internal temperature of the meat so that you hit that exact mark. With your first order of Prairie Street Prime meat, you get a meat thermometer. We'll send you one. And this is a terrific tool. You need to have this if you wanna have perfectly cooked meat every time. Now, to go with this braised brisket that we're doing, we're also going to make a roasted pepper and avocado salsa and some pickled red onions. So to make the salsa, you need a bell pepper. Now what I'm gonna do to roast this is I'm actually gonna plant it right on my stovetop like that. Now, make sure you have your ventilation on above your stove, of course, otherwise you're gonna have a kitchen full of pepper. Now what we're gonna do is just leave this sitting here until the skin starts to blacken on one side, and then I'll turn it over. And while that pepper is going, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut up my avocados and my tomatoes for that. And what I like to do with the tomato is stand it up, cut a few slices, and then dice that tomato. We'll scoop our tomatoes into the bowl. Okay, so there is my tomato. Let's give that pepper a little spin. So you can see now that it is starting to blacken. I'm gonna go a lot longer. I want that to get really blackened all over. So we're gonna just leave that pepper alone for a while. And in the meantime, we'll cut up our avocados. You wanna be careful when you cut up an avocado, right? Because it's got that pit inside. It can be a little tricky to get out. So what I always do is I lay my avocado down flat, put my knife in one end, and I spin the avocado around like that. Much safer than holding it in your hand and cutting it. Open up your avocado. We want to get that pit out. Again, don't hold it in your hand for this. Take your knife, hold the avocado steady, and just give it a little whack. Like that. Out comes your pit. Push it out. Now, take a spoon and scoop that avocado right out of the shell. You want them to be soft to the touch, but not squishy. We want an avocado that we can dice. Let's check on that pepper before we continue with this. So, now we're getting somewhere with this pepper. See how it's blackening all over? Now I'm gonna rotate it. I'm gonna do the second side. We're gonna leave that for a minute. We'll be back, don't go anywhere. We've got our tomatoes, we've got our avocado in here. So I'm just giving it a little toss. And I want to add some seasonings to this. So a little pinch of my kosher salt here. And I'll put a little black pepper in there. And I still have a little bit of that ancho chili powder that I used in my rub. So I'm gonna add a little pinch of that. And a tiny bit of sugar. Also, we need some acid in there. We're gonna add some lime juice. Now, let's check that pepper. So how are we doing, pepper? Oh yeah, beautiful. That is perfectly done. Now we're gonna transfer this right into a bowl, and we wanna cover it. So I'm taking a piece of foil. You just wanna trap in some of that steam, and we'll let that cool down a bit as it steams. Okay, now back to our salsa. So we squeezed that lime. Let's get that other half of lime in there. Give that a little stir. So we have our lime juice, we have our tomatoes, we have our avocado in here. We're waiting on that pepper. We're gonna take a little bit of cilantro here now. I'm chopping it up coarsely, and I even use the stem. I'm a big fan of total utilization in the kitchen. I hate food waste. I feel like if you paid for something, you should eat it. And again, I'm just folding that in. I don't wanna crush anything in here. And now let's check out what's happening with that pepper. So you leave it in here so that it steams, but also to give it a few minutes to cool down so that you can work with it with your fingers. So let's see where we are at with that. Now, see what I'm doing here? I'm basically just rubbing that burnt skin right off of the pepper. And what I'm going to do now is cut it open. I'm gonna take off the top and scrape out my seeds. And then we're gonna just julienne it. We're gonna cut little strips. I like the way that the little strips look on a taco. It adds some visual appeal. It looks really pretty. You could do small dice if you like. I just like to contrast the small tomato dice with the pepper julienne. So I'm just cutting little strips. Okay, so there's our pepper. Now let's give that a good little stir. And that looks amazing. Now, the final condiment for our tacos is some very simple pickled red onions. I'm gonna take this red onion now. I'm gonna slice my onion up. You don't wanna go too thin here. You want the onions to hold a little bit of a crunch, so I'm going about 1/4 inch thick. I'm gonna put them in the bowl. I'm gonna put about about 1/3 of a cup of my red wine vinegar in with my onions. Then a nice big pinch of kosher salt and about an equal amount of a little bit of sugar. You could also use honey in this. Honey makes a really nice flavor also. And we just give this a little stir. And I'm also going to add a little bit of lime juice just to match the profile of the rest of the menu. Okay, so my meat's been in for a while. I'm gonna just get in there and I'm gonna just reverse positions of the pieces just so that everything cooks really evenly. And I'm just going to switch the position on this bottom piece. I'm gonna flop that over and I'm gonna put the thinner piece back on top of it like that, because obviously that thicker piece is gonna need a lot longer to cook in there. And put the lid back on and see you later, brisket. Bye. Okay. Let's get some brisket tacos assembled. Check that out. Okay, now this looks beautiful. Also notice it did shrink quite a bit. That is something that happens with brisket because it cooks for so long, but now it's just perfect. It's done. We temped it. It's great. We're at about 205 and that is perfect for this kind of meat. So what I'm gonna do is just take a piece out. I'll lay it right here on my board. Just gonna cut a little chunk off the end there. And you can see how cleanly it cuts and how soft it is. Fully cooked, but it's still really juicy. And just use your fork and shred it up just like that. So I'm just gonna take all of this and I'm gonna throw it back into my sauce there. So we can start plating our tacos. So what I have here are some hard shell corn taco shells, and I've got some soft flour tortillas. Now these have to be toasted up a little bit. When you take them out of the package, you don't use them just like this. So I'm just gonna take this and actually, right there, right on the burner. Now you don't wanna leave it on there for too long because you don't want it to burn, but you can leave it just until it starts to soften up and it just toasts a little bit like that. Gives you a nice flavor and it also kind of softens up the tortilla. The tortilla is not actually fully cooked when you take it out of the bag, and this fully cooks it. So now we have our nice taco corn tortilla, and it's much softer now and more supple. Now I'm gonna put that on the bottom, and then I'm gonna take some of our spice rubbed pulled brisket, like that. On top of this, I'll put some of that pepper and avocado and tomato salsa. And then of course we always want to top with something pickly and something crunchy. So these are those pickled onions. They've been sitting for about an hour now and they look really nice. You see how pink they got? And they're still really crunchy. So a few of those pickled onions right on top. And then of course I love cilantro so much. Now we all know some people love it, some people hate it. So you love it, you go for it. Not so crazy about cilantro. You can use a different herb or just leave it off. And then I always like to finish this with a little lime wedge. You can squeeze a little lime right on there and you can serve with a little bit of lime on the side. So there we go. That is our spice rubbed pulled brisket taco. All right, let's see how we did. Ooh, look at all that juice. Yum. Yum. Wow. That is ridiculously good. But you know, of course it is, because Prairie Street Prime is USDA Prime brisket. So I started with the best quality meat that I can get. We used great quality ingredients. We rubbed it down with spices. We seared it. We cooked it slowly in the oven. We put a lot of love into it, and it came out amazing. So there's no way it wasn't going to be great, because when you start with the best products, you wind up with the best cooked food.
Coming up next on the Prairie Street Prime Culinary Kitchen channel, you'll learn how to make delicious kosher veal chop Milanese.
Take a little piece of this. Oh my God, it is the most incredibly tender veal I think I've ever had.
Thanks so much for joining me here today in the Prairie Street Prime Culinary Kitchen. If you love this recipe as much as I loved it, you can check it out below and make it yourself. Also, make sure to subscribe, to like us, and to comment on what you saw here today. We post new recipes every Sunday at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time. So remember to keep checking back in for more great content from Prairie Street Prime Culinary Kitchen.